Hello, Keith. It's Dan in Phoenix calling about the phone interview.
Yes, right. Okay. Can you call me back in about 2 minutes?
2 minutes? Not a problem.
Oh, actually, if you can give me 5, that'll be even better.
We'll give you 5.5.
That's great, man. Cheers.
Okay, cheers. Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. That was an excerpt from the Three Fates orchestral version of Tarkus, just one of the many masterpieces that was so brilliantly composed and masterfully executed by the always amazing Keith Emerson, who we sadly lost a few short days ago. About 3 years ago, I had the great honor of interviewing Keith. We spoke on the evening of April 15th, 2013, which unfortunately also turned out to be the day of the Boston Marathon bombing, as you'll hear him mention shortly. My initial impulse was to release our full, unedited conversation, but I soon realized that would involve too much duplication with the original interview. So I encourage anyone who missed that to go back and listen to it. It was episode 51. Rather than airing the entire conversation, instead I'm going to focus on as much of the previously unheard material as possible and intersperse it with comments from some of our listeners and past guests about what Keith's music has meant and will continue to mean to them personally. So let's go ahead and pick it up from the beginning.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Keith. Me again.
Yeah, I'm here.
Is it a good time for you now?
Yes, okay.
Okay, well, we're going to start just by dialing in the levels, and then we'll be rolling. I'm here with my engineer, Mike.
Sorry?
I said I'm here with my engineer. His name is Mike. And
all right.
He's gonna...
Okay. Sorry, remind me of your name again.
My name is Dan. Dan Miles.
Dan, of course. Okay.
Well, let's not say of course, but it's Dan. So if you could just speak just a little bit, he'll get a level on you. Do you want me to say you're in Santa Monica?
Yeah. Do you want me to speak a bit so you get a level?
Yes. Yes, please.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay.
Well, Mike is from Berlin, so he appreciates that little homage there. Okay.
It's what?
Mike is from Berlin, so he appreciates the homage there, counting in German.
I knew that, so that was for him.
Of course, you don't know my name, but you know my engineer's nationality of origin. Okay, great. Just let me fill you in that I recorded a little intro before we got you on the phone, and as I told you, we're going to focus on the Three Fates, and we played a section of a track from that already, Endless Enigma Part 2.
Okay.
There's a couple spots where I'm going to pause and play some samples, but for the most part, we'll just go straight through. So.
Yeah, you can do. Yeah. Actually, before you start, I just had lunch with Manhattan Transfer.
Great.
In view of a future project, but it was rather disturbing because the news of the Boston Marathon came through.
Right, that sort of soured the whole day today.
It kind of did that because one of their friends was was running in that marathon.
Oh my goodness!
You know.
Yeah.
And well, although we got through what we were doing, and it was lovely meeting them. It's just I can't understand what's going on here. I've run 4 marathons myself, and the last thing you need at the end of the race is to be blown up.
Of course.
It's just beyond being sick. It really is. I just
Yeah, it's baffling.
It's really soured my mood, quite honestly. Above all other things.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that information, and hopefully we'll be able to both take our minds off of it, because I have a lot of friends who live in Boston, and I'm not I'm also distracted by that as well.
Yeah. Okay, man.
Okay.
All right.
I'm going to take a beat and bring you in, and we'll be rolling.
Okay.
Well, one of the most admirable aspects of the Emerson, Lake and Palmer legacy is how so many of your fans credit the band with inspiring them to broaden their musical horizons. By celebrating a composer like Mussorgsky, you guys made it cool to like classical music and rock music, which is a gap many probably considered insurmountable. You also incorporated a lot of brief musical quotes into your playing. Now that I'm more educated musically, I recognize the sources, but when I was a teenager listening to your solo on Tiger in the Spotlight, when you referenced Dizzy Gillespie's Salt Peanuts, I wasn't aware of the 1940s recording yet, so I just attributed the lick to you. And I know it wasn't your intention to mislead anybody. You can't exactly stop the song mid-solo and make an announcement regarding where the next 16 notes came from. Well,
that comes out of my jazz mentality. If you listen to the great alto player Charlie Parker, his early recordings, you'll find that he'll just bring in a quote every so often. From a popular tune into his improvised solo. And I used to do that, actually. In fact, with the first Keith Emerson band, we used to have fun going on, stage, live recordings. And the bass player would possibly say something like, okay, now tonight, what about we try and incorporate how much is that doggy in the window? How much is that? Right, into their solo. So whoever could do that won a prize at the end of the evening. I know it's not that the audience really understood what was going on, and so normally I would try and sort of, if I was doing, say, the improvised solo for fanfare for the common man, and we're all going dunga 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 in E, and I would take the opportunity to go da 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 da.
Right.
I'd turn around at the band and they'd all laugh their heads off and go and thumbs up. Yeah, you did it. Yeah, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Or somewhere in the middle of Tarkus, have Tarkus going. How much is that dog?
Right.
How much is that dog in the window in 5/4?
It's a pretty innocuous tune to pick too. It's almost like Twinkle Little Star or something.
Yeah, you could do that. Well, I think we'd already done that, but we just try to make it more and more complicated.
Although I was aware of the Nice, I really got into Emerson, Lake and Palmer when I saw them in the March of 1971, which was in my hometown, Lewisham, south east London. And I suppose that evening convinced me that Emerson, Lake and Palmer were the giants of prog rock. Keith was amazing. I'd never seen a keyboard player like him. Still haven't, in fact. His brilliant showmanship, talent and enthusiasm, which is the thing that will really stay in my mind. I felt an overwhelming sadness when I heard that Keith had left us. To me, he was the greatest musician in rock history. My favourite piece that he wrote was Tarkus. I could not believe just how good it was live when the triple album came out. It was just incredible. His music will last forever. His time with the nice Emerson, Lake and Palmer, his solo work, including his concerto and film score work, is a gift to everybody who's an Emerson, Lake and Palmer fan. He was my inspiration for the Appreciation Group. He was my favourite musician. He was my hero, a king of coolness. I loved him and I'll miss him greatly.
Yeah, well, that's the whole meaning behind the word concertante, which is a concerto is one soloist.
Yes.
Who doesn't play a part in the actual orchestra. For instance, Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto Number 2.
Yeah.
It's a concerto because you've just got a piano playing the solo parts.
Right.
The piano does not really, well, in effect, he does help out with the orchestra sometimes, but that's not the primary job. The whole thing about a concerto is to show off the expertise of the soloist.
Sure.
A concertante, by contrast, it's still a concerto, but it involves many different soloists, all who do solo, but also their other role is to take their position in the orchestra.
Yeah.
So they all kind of mold over, they merge together.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between a concertante and a concerto.
Well, myself and my listeners appreciate that education.
So there you go. And I hope I want to see your homework at the end of the week.
Well, if my homework in school had been related to Tarkus, I'd have been a much happier student.
Hey, this is Kerry Compost Ciccone of Heliopolis, weighing in on the passing of the maestro himself, Keith Emerson. Keith Emerson's music really delivered me from the Monkees and acted as a stepping stone, if you will, to a higher art, another level, another platform of what music could be, how you could challenge yourself, not only as a writer, but also as a technician, in a sense, but also striving to reach that place where you transcend technique and beautiful melodies spill forth from thy soul. And melodies definitely spilled forth from the mind and fingers of Keith Emerson. If you know anyone with depression, do everything you can to reach out to prevent this kind of tragedy. And rest in peace, Keith. Your music means everything to me and will continue to inspire me.
And of course, what ELP did was to provide a sense of humor.
Yeah.
In the music. So I think that's what music has to have, actually. You need a degree of seriousness, but I think more than about 25 minutes of seriousness, then I think your audience starts to get slightly bored.
It's time for Are You Ready, Eddie, or Benny the Bouncer or something.
Well, that sort of stuff,
Yeah.
It's... I always, saw when touring that mainly our audience was male-orientated. Those females that were in the audience were either wives of the males and or girlfriends, and they normally sit there with glum faces, like they've been dragged there reluctantly, So I don't think we weren't like Led Zeppelin,
No.
Definitely we weren't like Led Zeppelin,
No, but I don't see orchestras in Tokyo working up Led Zeppelin compositions either.
No. But that's the thing, you get more. We haven't. I think now it's picked up a little bit, but not that I'm really that bothered about, attracting the opposite sex. You know, it's. But you know, in my younger years, it was kind of a disappointment.
It's funny because Tony from Genesis made the same observation. They had the same type of audience until they did that "Follow You, Follow Me" song on and then there were 3 albums. Then all of a sudden, half the audience was women because of that one song.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because
you know, ELP tried to do that crossover, you know, which Genesis did. That we failed, really, I suppose. Well, I just didn't feel comfortable with it.
No,
you know.
No, you got to be true to yourself.
Hi there, this is Alison Raymond, and I've been asked to say a few words tonight for the podcast about Keith Emerson. Well, I first heard Emerson, Lake & Palmer when I was about 13. I think it was back in about 1971, just after the first album came on, and I remember the impact that album had on me from the very first chords of The Barbarian right the way through to the end of Lucky Men and that fantastic Moog solo like nobody's ever heard before. Talk has kind of passed me by, and it's only in recent years that I've actually come to appreciate it again. It's just one of those things, but it's finally caught up, and I absolutely love it. But then Trilogy was just so amazing, so emotional, brilliant music. And I remember going to the cinema to see them perform Pictures and Exhibition, and then of course Brain Salad Surgery came along, and well, you know, there's been nothing like it then and nothing like it since. So I kind of went off a bit after that, but the impact that the band had on me and the fact that Keith Emerson was one of my teenage pin-ups, you know, that never leaves you. So in latter years, my one regret was that I never actually saw Emerson, Lake & Palmer because I was a bit too young to go to gigs when I was 13 or 14 when they're in their heyday. So when I heard that they were going to be playing at High Voltage, we just leapt at the chance of going. We went and we were quite near the front, and it was such a fantastic occasion. Then a couple of years ago, we were very unexpectedly invited to the Prog Awards, and we were sat so close to the back that, you know, one more row, we would have probably been in the gents and the ladies, but there were a lot of people walking behind us that we were watching, and this very slight figure came and sat at the table next to us. And I said, "Oh, it's Keith Emerson." And Rick Wakeman walked over and had a few words with him, and I thought, oh, I've got to go and speak to him. So I felt my 13, 14-year-old fangirl sort of coming out, and I walked over and started talking to him. Martin, my now husband, came over and took a photograph of us, and that's such an incredible memory of one of my favourite musicians. The guy was just a genius. The ultimate maestro, you know, the piano playing, the whole keyboard thing. He was so instinctive, so naturally gifted, and I'm trying to get some of my younger friends and colleagues now to sit down and listen to what he does, because this is real music. We shall miss him so much. We will not see his like again, but we are very, very lucky that he was one of the musicians who shaped our formative years and provided a soundtrack of our lives, and what a soundtrack that is.
Okay, I'm going to sort of finish up on this, and then I'm going to transition to just a general music discussion for a bit, and then we'll finish up with the film.
Okay, man.
Okay, we're going to take a beat.
All right. Are we out now?
We're out now, but we can come in whenever you want.
All right. Good. Well, give my regards to Berlin.
Oh, no. We're not done with the podcast.
Oh, we're not done with the broadcast?
No, I just meant we're off the air. Yeah. No. I have some things to say about the film when you and I are done. It's just, I'm going to go into a general discussion with you that doesn't pertain specifically to Three Fates. We're like 2/3 or 3/4 done here. It's just my fans are going to want to hear a little bit more than just the Three Fates, which we've kind of touched.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Okay, so
I'll tell you what. Do you want to? I just need to go to the bathroom very quick.
So do I. Yeah. Let's just leave the line open if you don't mind, and do that.
Okay. All right. Hold on.
I play guitar, and besides all the incredible beauty that you can make with a guitar, there's a real healthy amount of ego involved too. I mean, you get to do all the cool things like run around on a stage and take all these soaring solos, you know, and that's certainly a huge part of why people get into it. And in the 34 years that I've been playing music, there have only been 2 people that have made me deeply regret that I played guitar. And as an adult, it's been Bill Evans, but when I was 15, and I got hip to Emerson, Lake and Palmer, I just hung my head low and thought, wow, I've made a horrible decision, because I was already pretty invested in the instrument by then. But when I found Emerson, Lake and Palmer, it just hit all the buttons. I was so into what Keith was doing. His musicality was so huge. He's so versatile. I got the first Emerson, Lake and Palmer record first, and just hearing all the classical influences blew my mind. All the sound sources, from pipe organ to the synth to the piano. He was just a master of everything and created so much sound. And that's what I was the most jealous of, was that here was someone playing an instrument that could create so much depth. And that's always stuck with me. I was completely obsessed with Keith and Emerson, Lake and Palmer for years. I remember getting Trilogy, the third record, and just playing the song Trilogy over and over and over. Probably hundreds of times the first year I owned it. I just thought it was the best thing in the world. And I've tried to learn a lot of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Just Keith was the best. I'm so sad that he's gone. I love you, Keith, wherever you are. Thank you so much.
I've tried to mend the love that ended long ago, although we still pretend our love is surely coming to an end. Don't waste the time, you've got to love again. We tried to lie, but you and I know better than to let each other lie. The thought of lying to you makes me cry, counting up the time that's passed us by. I've sent this letter hoping it will reach your hand, and if it does, I hope that you will understand that I must leave in a while. And though I smile, you know the smile is only there to hide what I'm really feeling deep inside. Just a face where I can hang my pride.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question about your playing technique, because most keyboard players will play bass lines with their left hand and solos with their right, but depending on the requirements of a piece and the layout of your keyboards, I'm talking about old ELP concert DVDs, I've seen you play bass lines with your right hand and solos with your left. So is it challenging for you to have to reverse the bass and treble clefs in your head like that, or is that not a big deal for you?
Reverse the bass and treble clef.
I mean, I always think when I put my right hand on a keyboard, it's going to be treble, and when I put my left hand on a keyboard, it's going to be bass. So if all of a sudden I was playing a bass line with my right hand and soloing with my left, it'd be sort of reverse of what I'm used to. I realize you're playing a completely different keyboard that you're reaching for, but I don't think I've ever played.
Oh, you're talking about using two keyboards.
Correct. Yeah.
Opposite each other.
Correct. Yeah.
But quite honestly, I didn't find much difficulty in doing that. Well, not back then. I was a bit younger. I'm not quite sure if I'd feel comfortable doing it now. But,
right.
I've been very fortunate in the fact that my left hand doesn't need any looking after.
Right, right.
it's there on its own, and it's a great accompaniment for my right hand, which is okay. I mean, it's had a few problems, but I'm getting round that now with the getting more and more relaxed at the wrist and stuff like that.
Right.
So it says. I think Rick Wakeman once made the comment. He said, if you and I, should do a gig together, he said, I'll use your left hand and you can use my right hand. Well, actually, my right hand can be quite fast, but, I mean, Rick is quite dexterous, he's a good player.
Yeah, and you're going to have to reinforce that stage with 2 keyboard rigs up there. And I've also seen you play keyboards on opposite sides of you, so you can't really look. You have to play one of them blindly. But then again, I've also seen you lying on your back with an organ on top of you, playing it upside down. So I guess anything goes in your case.
Well, yeah, been there, done it.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for letting me be able to share a couple of thoughts about the late Keith Emerson. I've been hearing a lot of people compare him and call him the Jimi Hendrix of the keyboard, and I think that's kind of an interesting comparison, and I think it actually goes deeper than we realize. Certainly both musicians were very violent towards their respective instruments. We know what Hendrix did, and then, Emerson also, he was taking knives to his keyboards and flipping them over and, all the different things that he did. But I think both musicians also reinvented what it meant to play their instruments and the rules surrounding playing their instruments. And I think that Keith did that just as well as Jimmy, and really kind of reinvented what was acceptable in rock and roll. Emerson brought in all these really overtly classical elements, but the combination of the 3 musicians, Lake and Palmer, along with Emerson, was able to make this very commercially successful sound. I mean, the guys had 9 consecutive gold records in a row in America. That's pretty impressive. So, the other thing, other story that I remember hearing, I had a chance to interview Greg Lake a couple of years ago, and he was telling me the story behind Lucky Man. I found it interesting. They were recording their first album, and the producer said, hey, look, you need one more song. And I guess Emerson decided to step out for a bite to eat or something, and Lake was still in the studio, and he said, look, I got this song laying around that literally I wrote when I was a schoolboy. And they started working on this song, and then Emerson came back, I don't know, an hour or two later, and they had pretty much finished up the track, and he, turned on the Moog synthesizer and just started messing around, like, practicing to the end of this song. And when he got, as the song finished, he said, okay, well, rewind that so, I can start recording. And they said, no need to. We've already been recording, and what you just laid down was perfect. And so that just shows you what a talented person he really was. And Keith Emerson will be sorely missed.
What a lucky man he was.
Well, when you started out, the piano and the organ had been around for hundreds of years, but the synthesizer was a brand new thing, which gave you the opportunity to help pioneer that emerging technology. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you tell the story of the Lucky Man solo for the 5 millionth time. It just suffice to say that your playing on that track attracted the attention of the man who invented the instrument you played it on, Bob Moog, who was reportedly very excited to hear an artist use his invention in such a creative and interesting way. I know you went on to have a very close personal and professional relationship with him, and I was wondering how involved you were with the design and development of the early Moog products.
Well, after listening to Walter Carlos switched on Bach in 1968, I was very intrigued by, first of all, what this contraption looked like. Not only was I attracted by the sound that it made, and you have to understand that all I knew about it in 1968 was just this picture on the front of Switched On Bach.
I'm sorry, we're getting a lot of static in the phone line. Are you on a cell phone or a landline? Or
No, I'm on a landline.
Is it windy or anything? It just came out of nowhere.
No, it could be the battery on my phone, actually.
Yeah, we've had that problem before. Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Does this one work better? Hello?
Yes. That sounds
better. Can you hear
better.
me better on this one?
The static is gone, so I'm with that.
Is that better now?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good for you,
yeah,
Mr.
I think the battery's going on the other one.
We've had that problem before. If you want to pick it up with your thought on the appearance of the keyboards and Switched On Bach and everything.
Well, in 1968, I walked into a record shop in London and happened to know the owner and was introduced to the Switched On Bach album by Walter Carlos. And I was intrigued by the sound that this instrument made, but I had no idea what it looked like. When I saw the album cover, it looked to me like a telephone switchboard.
Yeah.
Which actually reminded me of what my father used to do, because he was a telephone engineer. And I thought, well, if I get one of these, I think my father's going to be very happy. So that wasn't the sole purpose of it, but I wanted to know more about it. There was a guy in one of Manfred Mann's team that actually had an early Moog synthesizer.
Right.
And I loaned the instrument from him and utilized it to great success with one of the last concerts with with the Nice.
Right.
In 1960, it may have been 1970 actually, and his name was Mike Vickers. He was the owner, and he programmed it all up for me, and I used it with, it was some orchestra, whether it was the London Philharmonic again, I don't know. But we played at Royal Festival Hall, and the Nice performed extracts from 2001.
Yeah.
And it proved so successful that when I formed ELP later that year, in 1970, I got hold of the Moog company and wished to acquire one. It wasn't cheap. It was very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And it took me a while. And thanks to Mike Vickers, he helped me find my way around it. And, of course, I think, as we know, it sort of really defined the shape of what we now know today as progressive rock.
Yeah, it did.
Keith Emerson left a legacy in the keyboardist world that will be remembered for years. And I have a lot of respect for Mr. Emerson and his contributions to the music world. And speaking for myself, as a female keyboardist, he has also influenced other female keyboardists, namely Rachel Flowers, based out of California. She is one amazing musician, and it is absolutely wonderful seeing guys that are basically like in their 70s and 60s influencing younger generations, especially younger ladies like myself. And I definitely salute Keith and thank him for the music that he's created throughout the years. Many thanks, and rest in peace and God bless.
It's very difficult in a soundbite to encapsulate the enormity of such a astounding musician, composer, technician, performer, rock god, showman. But I'll try. He was just so ferocious in so many ways. You know, it's very hard to qualify the best. But I just don't think anyone could touch him. His harmonic complexity and his just amazing technique, the depth of his music and his compositional skills was unparalleled. And it just blew everyone's mind, and it was musical, and it was exciting, and it was sexy, and inspirational. And they broke the mold when they made him. And thank you, Keith Emerson, for all you've given us.
In 2004, you published an autobiography called Pictures of an Exhibitionist, and there's currently a documentary film in production with that same title. Jason Woodford is directing the film, and I understand his father, David Woodford, is someone you've known for quite some time, so it must be reassuring knowing that your story is in the hands of people who you know and trust. What can you tell us about that film?
Well, of course, David and I don't think I've known a person as long as what I've known David, because we were at school together. Possibly the first best friend I hung out with. Not that I hung out with many friends, but it was quite a surprise to me to learn that he'd moved from England up to Canada.
Yeah.
And was quite ensconced. And he had a son, Jason, very talented son, who was winning awards in short films and stuff like that. And I guess David had got hold of my autobiography, and with his son's success in short films, and also with overseeing the film festivals, which they do up in there in Okanagan. I hope I spelled that right.
Is it British Columbia?
Said that right. Pronounced it right. Okanagan Festival, I think. But Jason oversaw all that, and his father oversaw what was going on. And I was very intrigued when they said, well, we're going to interview all the people in your book, and we think we can make a movie out of it. So I thought, wow, that's a good idea. So, I mean, at the very beginning, I didn't have really much to do with it, except I thought it'd be really good fun.
Yeah.
Let's try and find these people. And it was just before my mother went into her dementia.
Yeah.
And so she was filmed, and school friends and schoolmates and musicians and things like that. There's no doubt about it that Jason has filmed quite a lot of valuable footage, actually, and I also, in turn, I've offered a lot of archive stuff from when I was recording it in Sussex, and stuff that nobody else has really seen, or nobody else has seen. A lot of solo piano stuff, a lot of me playing with the original jazz trio, which I had going in 1961 or something. Stuff of me like in the 50s, very good. And at the moment, I think there's about 6 or 7 hours of footage, which really needs to be put into some sort of sequence that the viewer will look at it, even though he's not a fan and they don't know who the hell Keith Emerson is. Can go, wow, this is really entertaining, you know.
Sure.
So it's really a question of editing and additional music. Although there's enough of it, there's quite a lot of it there. But I think original music would be good.
Yeah.
But it needs, at the moment, it needs a direction. I mean, for instance, I thought one of the best documentaries was of George Harrison, the Scorsese.
Yeah, I saw that
thing of him.
That was very well done.
I thought that was very good. But you know, Jason is pretty adamant that he's going to achieve somewhere near it, and I'm not going to dispute that right now. Although I think that you know, if you are that close to a project, and as Jason and David have been for so long, there does come a time when you really need to bring somebody in and say, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. You've got to be very cruel to
just a fresh perspective.
Yeah, that you do need a fresh perspective. I mean, there's no doubt they've got lots of valuable material, and I'm the executive producer, but I'm not stepping on their toes at the moment. I'm just leaving it to themselves while they remain pretty confident in what they're doing, but also open to the idea of possibly bringing in an outsider just to get a fresh look on things, you know?
Yeah. I've got some more to say about the film project after we hang up, but before I let you go, I want to ask you one final question. It's kind of along the lines of what we're talking about now. You're so identified as a musician. I wonder what other diversions interest you when you're not making music. What are your interests outside of music? Well, actually, looking back on my life, right, as much as I tend to look forward, I suppose I tend to look forward with a slight amount of anticipation, if that's the word. I feel very sad for younger bands, and it is so much more difficult for them, True.
I feel very lucky that I was there at the right time. I mean, I'm sure Eric Clapton does. I'm sure that Roger Waters does, and Roger Daltrey. All of my contemporaries. Rick Wakeman. I've got no qualms with any of my contemporaries at all. I admire them tremendously, but I'm sure some of them go, well, if I was starting up today, I definitely wouldn't make it doing this.
Right.
When you've got one-hit wonders coming up with Gangnam Style or whatever the hell it is, it's humorous, and I really don't think people really take you that seriously. It's all about advertising. It's become very, very commercial, and unless you don't have all that advertising behind you and all this sort of hype, which when I was coming into it, you didn't need. I mean, if you were bad, you were bad, and you just didn't get hired again. Here it's all about, if you're advertised and ELP reunion. Wow, yes, everybody comes along. Oh, this is great. Well, I'll tell you something. I've often possibly got into a pub and sat down and played the piano, and nobody's given me a blind bit of notice. It's like, okay, he's good. I don't know who he is, whatever. Although, like, I just came back from Japan, and reluctantly I went to the piano, and I think everybody knew who I was, and that they went absolutely nuts. I hesitate to think that, if they didn't know who I was, would they have reacted the same way? And I think that there's something really sad and false about it. That these days you've got to have all the hype, you've got to have, all the advertising, you've got to have all this behind you, and then people will take interest. When I go out and I check on other bands or whatever, I can detect a good player.
Sure. Isn't that how you discovered Mark Bonilla?
Oh, he discovered himself.
I mean, didn't you just walk into a gig of his in San Jose and go, this guy's decent?
Well, somebody said this guy's pretty good, and I had to agree.
And so you went out specifically, you were given a tip on him.
Well, I think the leading thing was that I did get an inclination that he actually did like my music. So I thought, well, okay, I better check his out then.
Yeah, this is Mark Bonilla. Just wanted to contribute a few words in memory of Keith. He was a brother to me, really, and it was a hard pill to swallow, definitely, as I'm sure it was for a lot of people. But I got to look on the other side of it and think that it was one of the best times in my life, creatively and musically. And I think I did probably my best work with him. It was always a raise and call kind of thing. He would come with a piece of music, and he'd give it to me to work with for a while, and I would write a piece of music, and he would take it away and embellish it to the point that it just became this collective effort for both of us, and it was a very healthy creative relationship that we had together, and I think we pushed each other to the best extents, and we totally enjoyed each other's company, share the same ridiculous sense of humor, which I think came out of the music. And the great thing about Keith, as I said once, was that he took what he did very seriously, but he never took himself seriously. And I think that's what made him so endearing to everybody. And he changed the course of music history and inspired so many great keyboardists and guitar players to be better musicians and better composers. And I'll always be grateful for the time that we did have, and feel like it was a true blessing. So, mate, rest in peace, and I'll let Kevin Gilbert have you for a while now.
Table, telling how the world was round, fable after fable, lost and turned around, cold beneath the ground, laughing with the devils, on the seas of chance, playing fields were level, till I got the news. If I could be near you, and if I could hear you, maybe these fears of mine would was how it all could fly. Shook hands with the shadows of doubt, held into the sky. Well, if I could see you, then I could free you, and maybe these cares in time would draw away. I need a place to hide, and I need a space where I can touch the golden girl. That's all I ever wanted to see. And I need a place to hide, and I need a face to smile upon a frozen world. And that's all we ever had to be.
Yeah, in the circles I travel in, I don't think I know anybody who does not like your music. I'm not saying it to brown nose or kiss your butt. It's like I don't know anybody who just can't see, the gloriousness of, the three of you together with ELP, but also other things you've done, including the Three Fates. I mean, you're an elite musician, so if somebody says I don't like this, what they're telling me is they don't know very much about music.
No.
It's a message
Well,
I get.
that's very nice to hear. Nobody likes to be ignored. But I've gone through the whole ball game of it. Right through being ignored, and it's become fairly ugly sometimes. I'm only talking about the early '60s. It's a struggle, and when you see TV programs like The X Factor, and they're suddenly put into the highlight. They just haven't done their homework.
No.
It's I mean, there's so much crying that goes on in TV these days. It's like, I mean, they cry whether they've lost or they cry when they've won. It's almost like an expected thing. It's so pathetic.
Well, yeah, one of the sad things is the people who do have the ability and sort of deserve the attention and the accolades are sort of shoved to the side, and somebody who really doesn't deserve it is given the spotlight. And that's, these days, that is a great source of frustration for a lot of talented artists.
Yeah. So, there you go. I mean, the fact is, I'm really pleased that with my composing, and that's still working. The older one gets, of course, you're not as athletic at that thing. You can't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
But I think as Pete Townsend said, it looks kind of ridiculous when you're in your 60s and you're smashing guitars up. It doesn't look right,
I guess you have to change and evolve in certain ways, but, there's a point to that.
Well, you do, yeah. Eric Clapton still lays back and plays guitar, but from a technical level, I mean, there are a million guitarists which can outshine him. But it's just the fact that the name Clapton is a commodity. It's like Colgate toothpaste.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going to go into a chemist and you want a toothpaste, and you see some, and I don't mean this in a derogatory fashion, but if you see a Chinese toothpaste with a funny name on it, and you see Colgate toothpaste, you're more likely to go for Colgate, aren't you?
Brand recognition. That's what Clapton.
Yeah, it's brand That's all that Eric Clapton, Keith Emerson is, brand recognition.
Well, it's not quite all.
Well, no, it's not.
The reputation
is.
Well.
You've got to have the talent, but the thing is that, and you've got to have the. I don't. Quite honestly, I do not know where my inspiration comes from. It sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. You know, and when it does come, it's going to strike you at the most awkward moment. I mean, I've written music to a gate squeaking, you know.
There you go.
That's when I lived in Sussex, you know. I closed the gate and it came up with this tune, you know. And I instructed my sons, do not oil this gate. I have to write that down first, you
It's
know.
become a very valuable gate.
Yeah, and well, it did, actually. It ended up on the Emerson, Lake and Powell album.
Yeah, that's a good one, too.
The track was called Learning to Fly.
I remember that, yeah. Great album and great track.
And that was the gate that squeaked.
Well, you know, sources of inspiration can be many.
There we go.
Okay, well, I'm just going to pause. We have plenty to make a show out of. We touched all the things I wanted to touch on, so unless there's anything else you want to talk about, I can just, record a thank you and we'll be done.
Okay, well, not really. Let's do the thank you.
Let me take a pause and we'll be able to let you go. Here we go. Well, Keith, I've been a great admirer of yours for many years, as have my listeners. So on their behalf, as well as my own, I want to thank you for taking the time out to speak with me. It's been a rare privilege, and of course, you're welcome back anytime.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. It is Dan, isn't it?
Yeah, we won't keep that part in. It is Dan, so thank you very much. Yep. Well, we got what we needed. I'm not going to let...
No, I did that in a sarcastic manner, because we've been talking so long.
I know, I picked up on it, but it was one of those things where I know how I edit my show, and I know how to pace these things. Because after we sign off, I'm going to speak about that crowdfunding campaign for the film, for people that want to donate and get the rewards and everything, then play a final track and then wrap the show up. So, well, good deal. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go because we got some work to do, and because I appreciate what you've done, and I'll be in touch with you. And, CJ will be happy to hear this because he always likes to hear his name dropped.
CJ?
Right. I had a good talk with him. That's a popular episode. We talked about a lot of things with him. Funny guy,
yeah.
Great player.
Yes, he's a very good player. His father's also a very good player as well.
Hi, everybody. C.J. Vanston here. Like most of you, I'm shocked and saddened by the passing of a complete legend, Keith Emerson. And I just want to say a couple words about him. I happen to be lucky enough to call him a friend and have him call me one. And it's one of the greatest phases of my life, was being a friend with him. So, as a keyboard player and composer, I'm sure my story begins the same way most of my contemporaries do. We all remember where we were that first moment when we heard Keith Emerson, when that lightning bolt came crashing through the ceiling to forever change our lives. It was one of those moments in life that are completely indelible. You don't forget where you were, like the Kennedy assassination or your first lover. We all remember where we were when we first heard Keith Emerson. Mine was in my friend Tommy Novak's basement. There was a Bee Gees record playing on the turntable, and his older brother Jeff came running in, grabbed the record off the turntable and smashed it on a table, breaking it into 100 pieces. And we were all shocked and about to get mad at him. And he put another record on the turntable. He said, now this is what real fucking music sounds like. And he put the needle down, and there it was, the freaking holy grail that changed everything, the lightning bolt, like I said. It was like finding our Jimi Hendrix for us keyboard players. This guy broke all the rules, broke everything. And, the music was so amazing, the compositions, the tones, everything, the ferociousness of it. He could have been a nerd, and that would have changed everything. But on top of everything, I looked at a picture of him, and he was the epitome of style. He was the James Bond and Bach wrapped up in one package. It was just too much, man. That was it. I knew right then what I was going to do the rest of my life. Most guys my age had a Farrah Fawcett poster on the wall. I had a Keith Emerson poster and a poster of a Mini Moog. Those were the two things on my wall. And when I started touring with a band when I was 17, I took those with me and hung them up in every band house we stayed in. Keith revolutionized so many things. Obviously sound, synthesizers. His organ tone was ungodly. It will never be equaled. His sense of performance was off the charts completely. He was such a great entertainer. And most people don't know this, but ELP revolutionized touring on a large scale. They were one of the first bands, maybe the first band, to carry their own lights and PA. They famously had 3 semis. On the top of each one had the letters E, L, and P. In addition to all this, he developed unimaginable and unattainable chops, just flawless chops, which he used to perform these compositions that were from another planet. His compositions were a nod to all the greats in jazz and classical and avant-garde with his own stamp on it. That will all come out in the next 100 years. I think he was one of the greatest composers of the last 100 years. So I don't think he got enough credit for that. I think his chops and his performance and everything was so great that it outshined his composing to some people, and that will come out as more stuff surfaces that he's written, and the world will know what an awesome composer he was. Beyond all the obvious keyboard praise and glory, blah, 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 that everybody's going to say here, once I got to know Keith, it was his sense of humor that really stuck out, and that's what I want to leave you guys with. Always had a pun, always had a silly joke, always a smile, always a grin, always a laugh. That's when I realized how important humor was in his approach to music. You listen to things like Jeremy Bender or The Sheriff, and you can hear the little wink in there. And that's what made his stuff really stick, I think. It could have been so serious and maybe over the top serious, and he never lost that sense of humor. And when I met him, I realized where it all came from. Also, the more we hung together, the more we found we had a lot in common. Common passion for airplanes, aviation, common love for history and the sea, sailing, common fascination with Brubeck and Jimmy Van Heusen, and then a common fascination, almost a fetish, with writing pencils and erasers. We both had our little pencil bags with different grades of esoteric drafting pencils and esoteric erasers of all different kinds. That really cracked us up. But one of the erasers he kept on the edge of his piano really summed everything up to me. It was in the shape of an ear. It was his ear eraser. Get it? Ear eraser. That just summed everything up. The thing he used to correct his notes, the thing he used to write all those incredible scores, he used an ear eraser to erase with. So what a magical mix, man. A genius prodigy who put in his 100,000 hours of unimaginable work to achieve technical brilliance that, in my opinion, will never be equaled. A complete student, again, something I think is sadly lacking with a lot of musicians today. A complete student of all musical history, all things jazz, all things classical, and all things blues, back to Jack McDuff and Meade Lux Lewis, Oscar Peterson. He knew it all. But inside was the heart of a true showman, and the energy and carefree wit of a teenager. And he never lost that, ever. My last dinner with him was just all laughs. We just laughed and had such a great time. So his spirit was incredible. But most of all, as I said, and some other people might say the same thing, he was our Jimi Hendrix, us keyboard players. Before him, it was tinkle, 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 sit in the back, do your little part. But Keith came in and hung a pair of huge fucking balls on the keyboard. The tones and everything were so ferocious, as I said, and so aggressive. He made us all feel proud to stand out there and rock it, just tear it up. And, think about it. He didn't sing, yet he was the star of one of the biggest bands on planet Earth. It's unbelievable. It'll probably never happen again in history. And all of us were lucky enough to be around to see this, and I was lucky enough to have been influenced by him, guided by him, and even luckier to call him a friend. Love you, Keith. Thank you for everything.
Well, I would say CJ has a good point about Keith being the ballsiest keyboard player of all time. And I think that version of The Barbarian by the Keith Emerson Band pretty convincingly makes that point. I want to thank CJ and everyone else who contributed clips to the show today. Since many of the contributors did not identify themselves, I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge them all right now by name in order of appearance. Here goes. Thank you, Andrew Green, Carrie Compost Ciccone, Allison Raymond, Joel Martin, Tony Peters, Christine Fleckenstein, and Lyle Workman. Extra special thanks to CJ Vanston and Mark Bonilla, who are both very close to Keith and who are both understandably struggling to cope with this tragedy. We've been speaking quite a bit about the awesomeness of Keith Emerson, but I think the fact that those two guys took the time out to record these messages for us is a good indication of how awesome they are. So I'll thank them again on your behalf. As I've said before, my interview with Keith wouldn't have been possible without the help of his lifelong friend David Woodford, whose son Jason continues to work on Pictures of an Exhibitionist, which will surely be the definitive documentary about the life and legacy of Keith Emerson. To check on the current status of their film, please visit their website, which is progrockdoc.com. That's PROGROCKDOC.com. I know the film is nearing completion, but they could still use some help to carry it over the finish line, and I think under the circumstances, we all want to see and enjoy the film as soon as possible, so please visit their site in Keith's memory with a spirit of generosity. Well, I want to close this out with a final Keith Emerson story of my own. The marathon phone call we've been listening to excerpts from today was actually not the first time I spoke with Keith. I actually spoke with him once prior to that to introduce myself and make arrangements to schedule the interview. David Woodford had given me a number to call, which I had assumed was going to be for a publicist or some other third party, but it actually turned out to be Keith's home number. I called it a few times and got a generic message, and you've reached number so-and-so. Please leave a message. We're not here. I didn't really want to leave a message. I wanted someone to pick up. But eventually, I started to leave messages. Every once in a while, I would try the number. And one time, sure enough, Keith answered. That was that English accent and the sound of keyboards in the background. So I knew it was a correct number. I hadn't been fooled. It wasn't a practical joke that David was pulling on me. So he answers the phone. I say, hi, is this Keith? And very suspiciously, he says, yes, who's this? So I tell him it's Dan in Phoenix about the interview. And after a little pause, I get, oh, yeah. And he kind of remembered what was going on. And we started talking. And I explained a little bit about the history of the show and mentioned some of the guests who'd been on. I told him that C.J. Vanston had been on recently, and then Mark Bonilla was booked to be on soon after Keith. Everything was going fine. We were achieving a comfort level and establishing a rapport, and then I made a huge blunder. Lord only knows why, but because I certainly knew better, but I accidentally called the three fates the two fates, making me look like a complete idiot. So Keith very politely corrected me, but I could tell that my credibility was slipping at that point in his eyes. So I made the excuse that I was feeling tired because I'd been up the night before battling a scorpion, which was semi-true. After putting my kids to bed, I saw a big fat scorpion strutting along the carpet in the exact spot where they'd been playing about 20 minutes earlier. So I caught it and I tried to drown it in a glass of water. Kept checking on it every half hour or so, but after a few hours, the damn thing was still alive. So I transitioned it into a plastic sandwich bag and smashed it with a hammer. The idea being to make it a quick death. For those of you who don't live in Arizona, scorpions are very territorial. You can't catch and release those things. They're just going to come right back. So I was telling Keith about all this, and, he asked if I'd ever eaten a scorpion before. I said no, but on TV I had seen people in China casually eating scorpions on a stick, the way we might grab some cotton candy. So he started telling me about how the scorpion was the land version of a lobster, which I thought was kind of interesting. We went down that track for a little while, and then eventually we transitioned back to the topic of the interview. We got that all scheduled, and you know the rest. So after we hung up the phone, the whole thing, suddenly it felt very surreal to me. I thought to myself, was I just on the phone with Keith freaking Emerson? How does that happen? And were we talking about scorpions and lobsters? Yeah, it almost seems like I dozed off at the office and just dreamed this. So anyway, even though that was a much shorter conversation and obviously was not recorded, I think I'm even fonder of that call than the so-called official one that we did later. Because it wasn't a case of rock god superstar talking to obscure fanboy podcast host. It was just two guys talking about scorpions and lobsters. Good times. Well, again, I want to thank everyone who sent in a clip for this program. Thanks to Tom Bowers for his assistance engineering and editing the episode. Extra special thanks to Jason and David Woodford. And of course, we reserve the biggest thanks of all for the man himself, Keith Emerson, whose musical genius, whose one-of-a-kind stage presence, and whose wit and gentle humor will never be forgotten. And now, as my own personal tribute to Keith, I'll leave you all with a live recording from 1974 by Emerson, Lake and Palmer that expresses a sentiment which I have no doubt future generations will continue to employ when describing this great and epic artist. Take care, everybody.
She wanna be an angel, you wanna be a star. She wanna be some magic on my guitar. Do you wanna be a poet? Do you wanna be my string? You could be anything. Do you wanna be the lover of another? Undercover, you could even be the man on the moon. Do you wanna be the singer? Do you wanna be the song? Let me tell you something. You just couldn't be more wrong. You see, I really have to tell you, when you're buried in disguise by the dark glass on your eyes, though your flesh has crystallized, still you turn me on, yeah. You turn me on, yeah. You turn me on. Do you wanna be the pillow where I lay my head? Do you wanna be the feathers lying in my bed? Do you wanna be color magazine? Create a scene. Every day a little sadder, a little madder. Someone get me a ladder. Do you wanna be the player? Do you wanna be the string? Let me tell you something. You just don't mean a thing. You see, I really have to tell you that it all gets so intense. From my experience, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But still, you turn me on, yeah. You turn me on, yes you do. You turn me on.
All right, mate. Well, nice talking with you.
And you as well.
All right. You take care now.
Take care. Thanks again very much.
Okay, bye.